Hey, Bayek, it's me, Ian, and today I'm going to talk about this album, Billion Dollar Babies, Alice Cooper, 1973. Now, this album I'm looking at as one of my nostalgic, almost just time-travelling aspect when I look at an album, the memories it invokes, and this is definitely one of the best from them, but I think maybe there's a strong argument. I very much like Killer, the 1971 album, but this album means such a lot to me. And when I bought it, the excitement, I'll never forget it. Just, you know, I got all my money together. It's 1973, still at school, of course. I was only a wee laddie by it. Yeah, I was just 12 years old, I think. 12 years old I would have been. I'd heard School's Out the previous year, and that had got me excited. And I didn't buy the album School's Out because money was always tight then, and you know, saving my pocket money. But this album I had to get. I just had to buy it. I thought, I've got to get it, and I did. And the first single from it was Elected, because it was the time of the elections in America, and Elected was the sort of tie-in single to get the album, and I loved Elected. The whole band were absolutely fantastic, and of course at the time I saw them as a band, but it was Alice Cooper, the front man, who was the man. And what was great about Alice Cooper at that era, he stood out. He stood out like Bowie, actually. Bowie stands out for many reasons, and I'm not comparing him with Bowie, but he fits into that thing that your parents didn't exactly think, hey, what's that? Oh, heck, what's that? It's Alice Cooper, and he scared people to death, and we loved it. I loved, well, not all of it, you know, some people, kids, would say, no, I don't like him as well, but the parents, whoa, who's he? And I loved it as well, because there was kind of a controversy about him as well, because, you know, it started to get in mainstream newspapers that he was doing things on stage which weren't proper, you know. And you had people saying that he's not allowed in the country, trying to ban him from coming into art. You know, you had people like Mary Whitehouse said, disgusting. Yeah, she was still at it then. Mary Whitehouse, you may, not everybody would know her, but she's one of these like moral campaigners who like to stick her nose into everything and got lots of media attention, you know, saying the decline of the country and all the morals. But we loved it. Alice Cooper was great. And I loved him as well, because even going back then, I was also like a horror fan as well. I was really into horror films. And Alice Cooper kind of represented the horror aspect as well. Also, the music was heavy as well. Well, it is heavy. And then the great thing about Alice Cooper, they were a band that had quite a lot to them. And they weren't just a immediate thrash, you know, heavy kind of music. There was the poppy element. There was a more... There was even a sort of almost like a gentle side to them as well. I know that sounds a bit weird saying that, but it's interesting, because I think the thing about Alice Cooper, the influence, is that it wasn't all obviously rock that was the influence. There was a lot like of almost vaudeville music hall influence. You can hear it in the way he puts across. I'm saying him because he's obviously the major writer in the group, but you get this vaudeville music hall feel. It's very interesting. Also, this album, it shows that there is some connections here, was recorded in Connecticut, but also London. Yes, hey, yes, recorded here in UK. So, hey, there's some good stuff here. Yes, some good stuff. And I think what's interesting is, as well, this album, right, is their 6th album. I mean, I wouldn't have known it, but it's their 6th album. The real takeoff point was Love It to Death in 1971. There were 2 previous albums before that, but that was the real album. And interestingly, the producer, Bob Ezrin, was on board on that, as he continued to be on board with this. So it's a 2-year period, and they did immense work in that period. Honestly, they were touring, they were producing music, they were really getting out there, and it shows the work is incredible that they were doing. And then there they are, you know. Even the title is kind of a sort of, they said, was kind of almost like a saying, we're surprised and shocked like you that we've become so big that everything's taken off. The $1 Million Babies, you know, it suddenly happened. And they're new to all this relatively, you know. And there it is, the fame is there. And then you have to say, why is this album so interesting? And again, so it has a certain rebelliousness about it, and it's exploring certain themes, some often in a tongue-in-cheek way, but there is that horror thing which I always still love. But there's also a dark sense of humour, and there's a darkness of going into areas that perhaps we shouldn't always go to, but always sometimes done in a humorous way, like the perversions and people's darker side and our fears as well. Yeah, I mean, look at Unfinished Sweet. That's great. I mean, that's the humour. That of The Dentist is great. But you've got such a lot of things going on here. I mean, I think also it's interesting that the strength of the album is that there's 4 singles were released from this album. And I think one of the greatest songs on the album was actually the 3rd single release. Now, do you remember what the 3rd single release is? And perhaps in many ways, this song is one of the most covered and most aspired to songs, you know, on such a classic album. And that is No More Mr. Nice Guy. But that was the 3rd single. It wasn't a massive hit. It was a hit. In fact, I can remember it, but I remember as soon as I heard this album, No More Mr. Nice Guy just stood out. You thought, God, this has got to be a single. But it wasn't, because the next single was Hello, Hooray. Then it was Mr. Nice Guy, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And then it was the title track, $1 Billion Babies. But, I mean, what a track, and it's so iconic. I mean, this album, it's sort of, it has such an influence in many ways on a lot of people, because it stands for something that I think is important. It stands for innovation. It stands for progress. It stands for enjoyment. It stands for fun. It stands for darkness. It stands for humour. You can laugh as well. And somehow we just seem to connect with that. And all these years later, it's influential still, I think. One thing, I'm a great big fan of Talking Heads, and I love this. I heard David Byrne said that this album influenced him to write Psycho Killer. I mean, how cool is that? How cool is that? Yes. David Byrne said Psycho Killer was influenced by this. Yes. I mean, great. I mean, that's it. I'm convinced it's even greater now. But I always loved this album. I really always loved it. As soon as I bought it, I remember buying the actual vinyl album there, getting it, and just looking at it. And there was like these little picture card things in there that you could take out. And I did take them out. And you had this set of like cards as well of all different, I think there were like portraits and things of the band, etc. as well. Just another little trivia is that Mark Boland is actually a guitarist. I don't know where the tracks are that he's credited, but I suppose it's when he was in London. Yeah, there he was. That's just a bit of trivia thrown in. Also, one of the band members, Buxton, was suffering from pancreatitis and didn't play a great deal on this album. Basically, alcoholic abuse had caught up already in that, which is not an uncommon thing, is it? Unfortunately, at the time. The album has got so much around it, so much thing. And this here was one of the early CDs I bought. I don't think it was the first one, but it was very early on that I got this CD. It was one of them I just had to have back, because I'd got rid of all my record collection. Oh dear, no, I don't know how to think of it. Anyhow, but, and I started to build it back up, and I have done. But this was definitely an early CD that I got. I just had to have it. So what can I say about that? I think just when you look at the whole tracks, you just see such almost a musical journey as well, because there are such great like, for instance, like there's this little track called Mary Ann, and you're wondering what the hell is that doing there? And it's almost like a sort of, again, this sort of cabaret kind of thing, but the sweetness, it's so kind of being super sweet in contrast to what sort of things around the way he sings it, Alice Cooper, and that it's just, there he is. And that kind of sums up this album, why it's so interesting, why it's still interesting when you hear it musically, And I Love the Dead. I mean, it's about necrophilia, for goodness sake. But it's done in such a tongue-in-cheek way. It's just, and it's there at the end. It's done like an anthem. And it's just, what can you say? It's just amazing. But the whole album is, everything about the album is amazing. And if you're not sold by now, you should be. Get out there and buy a copy. Go on, get a copy. I'll tell them. But you won't go wrong, honestly. So, here we are then. This is my review of $1 Billion Babies, Alice Cooper, and why it means such a lot to me, and why I'm very, very passionate about it. So, all I've got to say now is, I'll see you on the next video. I'll see thee, and I'll see thee again.